Good morning. Today I'm going to discuss the continuation of integration of hardware and firmware. So integration of hardware and firmware means your embedded software you are copying into the hardware so that your hardware will be working accordingly. So that means you are embedding intelligence into the device. So in that we have seen a various way of copying the firmware into the hardware. That means integrating the firmware into the hardware. One is out of circuit programming, then in application programming, in system programming, factory programming. So there are various ways we have seen in the previous session to copy the firmware into the hardware. So all those ways in which type of devices we have to follow all the way of copying your firmware to the hardware we have seen. So for example, when mass production of embedded system is required, then you can go for using factory operated like factory burning of your embedded device. If you want like if you want to build when the system is working, if you want to build, then you have to go for in system programming. Then sometimes you have to detach your hardware, and then you have to continue with working with, like you have to copy the hard firmware, then you have to go for out of circuit programming. So we have seen various way. Now still some more topics is pending in this chapter. We'll be discussing that later. I will continue with the module 2, which of the programs we discussed before the like before the lockdown, and then further we could not complete. So I will start with that. So module 2. Now we are discussing what is simulator, emulator and debugging. So simulator is a device, it's a software where your target hardware you can simulate with the help of software. So you can, it is completely software based. You don't need any of the target real-time target system, and it's very simple one, primitive one, and it does not have any real-time behavior because we don't work in the real-time environment, so we cannot expect complete real-time behavior. Some of the features of your program you can simulate. So here in your third sem EC lab, you would have used software programs. You would have simulated the electronic circuits in the tool, and you would have observed the output characteristics of your circuit. So that is an example of simulating your hardware circuit with the software. So whenever you build a circuit, you want to see the behavior and output. What are the output you are getting? What are the voltage you are getting? If you want to see the behavior, you can use the simulator instead of directly working with the hardware. Now you have some advantage of simulator based debugging. So here no, we don't require any original target board. So whenever some program you're working, every time you cannot copy your firmware into your hardware. Because here when you are in the development stage, you are creating your firmware. You want to check your output. So every time we cannot work with you cannot work with your hardware. So every time you have to copy. If it's out of circuit programming means you have to remove your chip, and then you have to copy the program into that, and then once again you have to check whether it's working. So this is not a tedious task. So you can use a simulate the target CPU in your IDE itself. This will help your development time. It will reduce your development time. So in a real time, without real time hardware, you can check your firmware, whatever you are developing in the initial stages. Once everything is fine, you can copy your firmware into your target board. And that's why this is the biggest advantage. You are not using any original target board for running your firmware. Then next you have simulating the I/O peripherals. So even your I/O devices also, you can build a circuit and you can check your like LED, your LED circuit, no, whatever LED circuit you have, you can build with your what we have seen the output of LED in our lab. So same kind of LED output you can build in Keil. So all the stepper motor, everything you can run in a Keil without hardware. That is also possible. But actually we have to work with the physical hardware. That's why we are in a lab we are doing. But a stepper motor you can simulate in your I/O peripherals also you can bring in your Keil. So without your board, you can show the simulation of a stepper motor rotation. So an LED switch on and off. So your LED will be in like on and off. You can show in a different colors, and that how many LEDs you want before writing a program. That simulation your simulator, no, you can design how many 10. If you want 10 LEDs, you can design 10 LEDs. And sometimes you want to check your stepper motor, you can take the stepper motor circuit and you can bring the stepper motor in a graphical user interface. When you run the program, no, it will make your stepper motor, which is visually available in your Keil to run this. So this softwares are available, which will simulate your I/O peripheral. And then you can simulate the abnormal condition. When you want to check for some abnormal condition with your real-time hardware, if you check with abnormal condition, what will happen is your hardware may your device may get spoiled, or because of some abnormal condition some of the ICs may burn. So such kind of abnormal conditions, if you want to work, you want to find the outlier or something, what is that voltage, threshold voltage I can give it for particular hardware device, that and I want to check. So those things are not directly instead of checking with your directly checking with your device. What we can do is we can simulate the abnormal condition by using your simulators. So this will help you to check any of the parameter which is like a outlier parameter in the for debugging purpose you can check it. And these are all the advantage of using simulator based debugging. So there are some limitations also is there in simulator based debugging, because however we simulate also, we are not using our real time hardware. So your real behavior may deviation from real behavior may happen because all the possible inputs we can do, and then you can check the simple codes you can check, but some particular result you want to achieve, you have to work on the real time environment only. Okay. So there is real timeliness will not be available. So it will not like some critical things you want to work in a critical real time behavior. So that type of a debugging you cannot achieve. So you have to, once the program working and all, you check with the simulator environment. Then for any of the real time behavior, you have to choose the real time hardware only. So before that, all the possibility conditions you can check with your simulator, and then some of the real-time behavior which you can't check with the hardware, you can go, like you can't check with the simulator, you can use your hard firmware. Next, emulators and debugger. So usually why debugging is required is in real-time application, you have to diagnose your firmware execution in all the cases, because we have to debug it by explicitly providing the some of the breakpoints. We have to perform the debugging. So when if you all the cases, it's like something testing, you software testing you will do, no? Same way you have to debug the hardware so that when your hardware is installed in the real time, there should not be any issues. So that's why we have to debug the hardware circuit. So here, while running your firmware, no, it will check for the various signals which you receive from the buses, and then how much voltage output is generated. All this will be checked with the real-time behavior will be checked with the embedded hardware. So you have your debugging process is classified into hardware debugging as well as firmware debugging. So hardware debugging deals with various monitoring your bus signals, and firmware debugging is like working with your software firmware. What are the firmware execution to check? Hardware debugging, what are the output you are getting in the hardware devices? That information it will debug. This is how it will work. And you have something called as incremental EEPROM technique. In this debugging technique, in this what it will do is entire complete firmware, instead of copying in your EEPROM at once, what it will do is only the if I have my complete working software, what I will do is I will divide into groups. So instead of copying entire code in EEPROM and instead of debugging everything once, what we'll do is your code is bound in your EEPROM in an incremental order. So the corresponding functionality are separately coded and it is cross-compiled and it is copied. The copied means bound into your chip one by one. So we have to, that one level you have to, it is produce the correct results, then you have to go to the next level. And then if the corresponding to any functionality, your output is not expected result, first you have to debug that particular level, then you have to go to the next level. So with this, now we can achieve the very good level, because level by level you are checking. So if you complete your firmware, you are divided for 5 functionality. Each functionality is loaded individually. Once that particular functionality is working fine, then it will go to the next functionality. So it may be time consuming to do that, but when you do it this way, it produces a very good result. So everything copying five functionality together and identifying where the problem is occurring. So that and all is a difficult task. This we are doing step by step. It is a very good way of bonding your firmware into your EEPROM, and you are debugging only one functionality at a time. Once that is fine, then next functionality will check. And then you have something inline breakpoint based debugging, hardware debugging. In that inline breakpoint based debugging is another method for firmware debugging. So when you want to, you will be keeping some specific breakpoints when like within the firmware where you want to ensure the firmware execution. So you will keep a specific point, and then whenever you reaches that point, no, there the code will stop. Like if I keep 3 breakpoints, once I complete first, when I reach the first breakpoint, your code will stop executing. By the time your register content you can see. So your register contents are it's copied with the proper value. Then next we can continue the execution. So because why you are keeping a breakpoint is, so your 100 lines of a code, wherever you want to analyze the code, you are keeping the breakpoint. So in your particular sorting techniques, in after each loop you can keep the breakpoint. For example, bubble sort if you are executing, once every time the first iteration is over, whether the highest element is placed at the end of your array, you can check it. That memory location you can check it. Whether it is reached, no, that particular part is working fine. Again, one more time when you come back to the second iteration of the loop, breakpoint will show, and then you can verify whether it is happening or not. This is a simple example. Usually this type of debugging will be helpful for like complicated projects, and that wherever you feel after this you want to check whether your output is executing properly, there you can keep a breakpoint, and then when you reach a breakpoint, it will stop executing, and then parallelly the people who are debugging, no, they can see the content of the registers and your flag content, everything they can analyze, and then they can assure that till this point your code is executed fine, there is no issue. Then once you resume back to the execution, again one more breakpoint, it will stop. So this type of a breakpoint based technique will analyze your firmware. Wherever you necessary, you can keep this, and then you can analyze your hardware register so that the execution of your firmware is happening properly. Then next technique you have is monitor based firmware debugging. So monitoring program based firmware debugging is it's an innovation method for a firmware debugging, in which in this monitor program, what are the monitor program you create, that monitor program act as a supervisor. That monitor program act as a supervisor, and then that monitor program controls the downloading of user code into code memory, and it inspects your register content memory location, and then it implements the debugging function as predefined. Some commands are there, based on the predefined command it implements the debugging function, and then it takes the data from the, always listens the data from the serial port of your target device, and then based on the device whatever received, it is going to act accordingly. So this is one user interface monitor. Monitor means it's a small window where that program will be opened and your target device will be connected to your laptop or some hardware like PC, and then after connecting that to the PC, you will open the GUI based monitor program. That monitor program will observe what is happening in your hardware. This is a monitor based firmware debugging. And next you have so here through the monitor based debugging through the RS-232 USB cable, the program is monitored. This type of monitor we are calling as monitor ROM, and this is it will work for your firmware downloading and memory register inspection, everything it will perform. And this is all about your the previous fifth model part is completed, and here if you have any queries, you can discuss any queries. Recording. So next you have in-circuit emulator IC based firmware debugging. IC in-circuit emulator. So in in-circuit emulator, you have, this is your in-circuit emulator, and this is the microcontroller which you are going to check, and then this is your target, like target MCU are connected through the socket to the in-circuit emulator. This is your PC. From the PC through the RS-232 data goes transmission and receive occurs. This is our RS-232 port, and your target emulating circuit is available in circuit emulator. So because we have seen simulator and emulator both, usually if you see, sometimes both are software only, your simulator and emulator, which is going to depict your hardware environment. Wherever your hardware is complete hardware testing is not possible, we'll take this. But sometimes you'll be confusing which is simulator, which is emulator, and all. So that's why we just come with another concept called as in-circuit emulator. It's already we are told simulator is a software application. It's duplicate your hardware CPU, and various features will be available by the target system. Whereas an emulator is a self-contained hardware device which emulates your CPU. It will have some hardware device which emulates the CPU. Here the simulator is completely software, but whereas an emulator is a hardware device, it is only for debugging purpose. We just take this hardware device which emulate your microcontroller. And here this is the sample diagram of in-circuit emulator. And then in this, what we have is special hardware device we'll design only for testing purpose, which emulate your functionality of processor and microcontroller only for copying your firmware, like you're checking your firmware execution, and you are setting your internal and CPU register content. For that purpose only, we will build a special hardware device. That hardware device is called as that hardware device. That the hardware device is called as in-circuit emulator. And in this you have an emulation device. That emulation device is replica of your target process, and which receives the various your signal from the target board through the adapter, and then You have a emulator device can be a chip, standard chip like your target CPU, and then that only for testing purpose you use. And then memory also will be emulating or whatever the memory we have, that emulating the same kind of a memory also will be emulating in your in circuit emulator. So how much memory requirement we need for firmware execution, no, that much will emulate in the in circuit emulator. And then you have a emulator pod which is connected to the target board, uh, which is for sending a signals to the target board. This emulator pod is used for transmitting your signals to the target board through the signal cable. And then you have device adapters, and then in the device adapter is an interface between your target board and emulator pod. So this is a pin-to-pin compatible sockets will be available through which you can connect your target board to the emulator pod. And then you have one more thing we call as on-chip firmware debugging, OCD. In this, in your actually when you take your Raspberry Pi board, you have JTAG debugging device on-chip debugging device, which is available along with your target board only. So this is a new way of target debugging. Even our ARM evaluation board also, we have JTAG pins, which is especially used for debugging purpose. JTAG port. I think you people, when I explaining the your device, I showed you the JTAG port on the ARM evaluation board. So JTAG port is available. That JTAG port is especially used for on-chip software debug support. So what it will do is, whenever you want the hardware to be debugged, you can directly connect to the like any hardware circuits you want to work with your microcontroller that you want to debug. So you can connect to the JTAG port and then you can control through the program, so that you are no need of having the external debugging facility. In the chip itself, we can have one port where you can connect the your devices and then you can debug. So here with JTAG debug, we have these are all the signals we have. One is TDI, test data in, TDO, test data out, and clock, and then mode select and reset. These are all the JTAG signals which is available for debugging purpose. And then you have remote, even you can remotely, you can through the Wi-Fi you can you can communicate to the remote debugger application also. That is also possible. So in this is an advanced semiconductor technology, which is a new way of target firmware debugging, where your ports are available in the chip itself, and through the chip you can connect your your debugging embedded device, and then you can debug whether it's working properly or not. So this is a sample example on chip software debug JTAG port, which is available in Raspberry Pi board and it's available in our ARM evaluation board. So you can, once you just see the board, you can look into the JTAG port is available. Even if you want, you can see the JTAG port, how the JTAG port will look in your Raspberry Pi also. The Raspberry Pi diagram, if you take and if you see, JTAG port is available. What is the role of JTAG port? If you Google it, it will tell you for the debugging purpose how it is used in a Raspberry Pi. So this is about debugging. And one more you have is one more topic we have is target hardware debugging. So target hardware debugging means you have some hardware devices which is connected. You want to check whether it is soldered properly, or you want to monitor the signal. No, for that purpose you have a devices. So you have one magnifying glass. It's a primary debugging tool for debugging hardware environment. Whatever debugging we have discussed previously, it is software debugging. Software means your firmware debugging. Whatever firmware you are placing in your embedded system, it is working fine or not. You are able to receive the output after execution of your firmware that was debugged with the previous technology. Now you have to debug your hardware. Hardware means components, whatever it is connected. Now here magnifying glass will help you to check, like, because some of the components are very small. Now you get the hardware, there may be chances of some of the hardware was broken, or some of the hardware your chip, there are so many small chips are there, potentiometer, you see, jumper, there are jumper pin. People used to want to check some where is the jumper. No, we used to in a nap, like in your eye, if you want, if you check, no, some of the very minute hardware details you cannot visualize properly. So that's why you can use your magnifying glass, and then you can check some of the connection is lost, or some soldering is missing, or some of the track is sometimes, no, your jumper port, no, it will bend, so you are not able to connect, so that you can check with the magnifying glass why it is not able to insert that, so that you can observe through the magnifying glass any damages occur to your hardware code. So then multimeter is another device. So why you have multimeter is, multimeter will help you to measure the electrical quantities like voltage and current, capacitance. So multimeter, various parameter which is coming out of your hardware, no, you can identify by connecting the multimeter. So you are one chip, you fit like one particular, you have connected your CRO, you are not getting the, when you run, you are not getting the output. Then you can take your multimeter, and then the CRO, you can keep your positive and negative, this thing, like you have a DAC port, no? In the DAC port, you can keep your multimeter, your two, like you'll have positive and negative of your multimeter, you can keep on that. And then whether you are receiving the signal voltage in that multimeter, you can check it through the multimeter. So these are all the hardware debugging tool. And then you can, CRO is also one of the hardware debugging tool. You can connect your CRO to the channels, and you can capture the waveforms, and then you can analyze the behavior of a waveform. A CRO is also analyzing, like if your waveforms are properly generated, no problem. If waveforms are lot of interferences there, noise is there in the power supply line, your output of your waveform will not come properly. So through the CROs, we can analyze the output of any of the waveforms, so that whether it has a noise or not. So you have digital CROs, and then you have like the older one. So most of the modern CRO, you have more than one channel to capture the various signals. So you can use of any of the CRO. And then logical analyzer is another the hardware debugging tool. Used for capturing the digital data from digital circuit, and it contains connectors and clips. You can connect to the target board, and then it's a logical analyzer. If you take note, it's the exact reflection what happens in a particular line of a firmware. So that data you can capture and you can analyze the data. Then next you have FG's function generator. It's not a debugging tool, but it's an input signal. It generates the input signal, and it produces various periodic waveforms, like your sine wave, square wave, sawtooth wave. So this periodic waveform can be given as input to the any of the target part. But this particular is not a debugging tool. Only till 4 is a debugging tool, like logic analyzer, CRO, and magnifier glasses, and multimeter, all the debugging tools. And this is just for generating input, which is given for the sum of the part of a target board for debugging purpose. Then next you have one more thing called as boundary scan. So this boundary scan is here in this boundary scan, it's a device. It is used to total board, like it's a small device. With this, no, what you can do is interconnection of various chips. Now if you take any of a device, it has many ICs. So in that, many ICs will be available in one device, one board. If you take, no, it is not made up of single IC. So it will be having more than one IC and various chips available in a single board. So whether that interconnection between the, if I take any board, it has microcontroller, and it has, if you, in the microcontroller you have ARM processor, and an ADC, timer, and then port. There are so many chips are available in this LPC214 microcontroller. You have so many other chip along with your processor. If you take a microcontroller along with your processor, you have many other chips like your ADC, I2C interfaces, and timer circuit. Again, when I say timer, means that is also a chip. ADC means that is also chip. So along with your processor, these chips are connected, interconnected. So if there is any signal loss between your processor and the from the microcontroller processor to of the timer, no, that you can analyze with the boundary scan method. The boundary scan method, it generates the way, whether everything is interconnected properly. So in this PCB, process control board, you have processor in this board, no, you have different IC device 1, IC device 2, IC device 3. So in this, no, output of this device has to go to output of this chip has to go to this chip. This is the input now, and then this output has to go to here. So output of this will be given to this chip. Now these chips ICs are interconnected. So this, whether any connection loss happens here, the control is not like this two devices is not connected, your board will not work in expected way. In that scenario, what will happen is you can analyze that with the help of technique called as boundary scan. So boundary scan is a technique which is used for testing interconnection between various chips in the given single board. So by using a JTAG interface, we are going to analyze this. Okay, in this one path will be formed inside the boundary board by the interconnecting your devices through the JTAG signal. These are your JTAG signal. Now here this is a tap, this is a port for testing purpose. Finally, this is a test access port. This is a test data in. So test data in. And then this is the test data out. The test data out pin will be given to test data in for this chip. From this out, this will be given to this. So finally, this output will be given to test access port. So these port lines are used for checking whether you will get a proper signals here. So from sometimes, no, any proper signals are not getting. That means there is a problem in the ICs present inside the board. That way we can perform a boundary scan, and then we can analyze your complete board where it has various ICs present in the board. And then you have input cell in your IC. So this is used for this is a scan cell for the purpose of performing your boundary scan. And then your output pins are used called as output cell. So you have input cell and output cell. Though your boundary scan cell is used for capturing your input signal and it is passing to the internal circuitry. And then what will happen is you can get a proper connectivity path, then only your output will be generated properly. So you can, whatever the output you are getting from there, you can analyze that whether all the chips are interconnected properly. So for analyzing this type of device, you have something called as some language you have. That language is boundary scan description language, BSDL. So by using boundary scan description language, you can perform a boundary scan test on the particular board. Actually, BSDL is a subset of your VHDL language. So VHDL is another this thing you have using for hardware debugging purpose. So your boundary scan description language is derived from VHDL only. So you will give an input file to the boundary scan tool and it generates the boundary scan test cases for PCB. So those test cases will help you to analyze whether your complete circuitry is working fine or not. So by this we are completing in the main 5th model. Now I'll just now this is the module 2, second half of the module 2. And here we are learning how to write an assembly code in optimized way. So the topic, if you see, writing and optimizing ARM assembly code in optimized way. That is the topic here. And then whenever here where you people performance of your embedded working will be degraded because of some routines which will take more time. So some of the critical routines which you are writing, no, that will take more time, which is going to dominate your performance of your embedded software project. So what we can do is you can optimize these routines and you can reduce the power consumption, because that routine is taking more time, and then this will in turn will lead your system's power. So power consumption you can reduce by optimizing those routines. And then you have to reduce the clock speed also for a real time. You can, for the real time operation, by optimizing these routines you can reduce the clock speed also. And optimization is a technique. What, how you can achieve the optimization is by properly scheduling your instruction. So instruction scheduling means you have to reorder the instruction in a sequence where there is a hello, any queries? Instruction scheduling, reordering the instruction in such a way that you can avoid the processor stalls. So what is the processor stall? We used to discuss in your pipeline process thing. So you have showed a even diagram also where some of your execution will be stopped because you don't get the data from the previous execution. So this is called as processor stall. In your pipeline, you can call it as a pipeline stall also. So your load instruction takes more clock cycle, and add instruction, arithmetic instructions and all, this takes less clock cycle. Now you need a data for adding from the memory. So previous instruction of load will be taking 3 clock cycle. By the time your add will come for execution, still you did not get the data from the previous instruction for adding purpose. Then your pipeline will stop there. It will wait for the data from the previous cycle. So your pipeline will stop for some few clock cycle. This is called as pipeline stall or processor stall. So we can rearrange the instruction such a way that we can avoid this type of waiting of a data. And then register allocation. So how variables should be allocated to register stack, and minimize the number of memory locations, and that and all we can do so that our ARM assembly code will be efficiently working. And then you can follow the conditional execution. So conditional execution like add equal. So when you use a conditional execution, a number of lines will be reduced. Only the condition is satisfied, it will execute the further available instruction. So because of the conditional execution, your number of line of execution will be stopped. So conditional execution will help you to reduce the number of lines. So these are all the way you can you can optimize your performance. Now here we have a very simple program of square, where you have written one function. That function is going to square a given integer and it returns this value. So this what they have done is this they have written in the assembly code. In that assembly code, the square root function they have written here. Here, if you take the square root function, it is available in the C code. Your square root function is available in the C code. The same square root function, you can write it in the assembly. Instead of C, you can write in the, this is available in C. This, whenever you write, why you want to write this in your assembly is, this is written in your C. Why you want to write in assembly is, this code, when it is converted into assembly, your machine will generate its own code. So in that own code, whatever the code you are getting, that will not be so effective as user written code. So instead of your C code, which gets converted into assembly, and it is not more efficient how we are writing. So because processor converted assembly codes will have lot of unnecessary lines. So instead of making that to happen, what we can do is we can write our own assembly code. So in our own assembly code, when you're writing, we are used that particular square function which is there in the C. Completely we are converting that into assembly. Now here you have something called as ATPCS standard. So ATPCS standard means ARM Thumb Procedure Call Standard. So in ARM Thumb Procedure Call Standard, so whenever we pass parameters to the function through the C, and you are calling the function in the C. The function is written in the assembly. So what are the parameter you pass in your C function, where those parameters are stored? That is defined in the ATPCS standard. So in ATPCS standard, you have totally 4 arguments. If I write a function, I pass argument 1, 2, 3, 4. I can pass n number of argument also. But here only these 4 arguments, first 4 arguments will be stored in R0, R1, R2, R3. If further, if I pass any of the arguments, if I pass A5, my program, my function is going to process 5 arguments. So in this scenario, 5th argument will be available in the stack. The 5th argument will be available in the stack. So only the first 4 arguments will be available in the register. Rest of the arguments which you are passing in the function, that will be available in the stack. So whenever you write the function with the 5 more than 4 arguments, then the remaining arguments you should use a stack pointer to access that and then to process that. Now here why that R0 is taken here is, here you are calling the, actually you are calling the square function. How many arguments you are passing? You are passing one argument, argument 1. Only one argument you are passing, that is I. So first you have only one argument. So first, anyhow, the first argument will be available whenever I pass this argument. First argument, this is the first argument. This will be stored in this will be stored in, this is your argument 1, A0. This will be stored in R0. This argument will be stored in register R0. So now that's why when we write a code, we are using R0 here. So that square function is called, this is your assembly code. This is your assembly code of a square. You are calling the square function from the C. That square function you are calling from the C, and then your square function you are written in assembly. Now here you are using export assembler directive. What is the purpose of export assembler directive is, so this square function is used by some other module. That's, if I don't write export, I cannot use by other, this particular module I cannot use in other program. So export is assembler directive, which will tell you the name of the module which is specified here will be used by some other module. Now if I see, you have something called as area assembler directive. So when I write a code, this is the code, this is your name of, this is your memory. This is the memory if you take. Okay. Now my code is going to be, this code will be copied in this memory location. So you have continuously, you have a memory which starts from 0 to till end. Okay, now this is my portion of the memory which is used for copying this complete program. Now what happens is, for this complete area, I'm giving the name by using area assembler directive. Area assembler directive is used for giving the name for the area in the memory where the code will be copied for the execution. Now this is followed by area is the name. Actually, if I write the name as square something, square, only square if I write, so then no need of this vertical bar. But in this, if you see, you have something called as dot here. So when you have dot or special character as a part of your name, text is your name, actually text is your name, but text is not just a name, but it has some special character dot here. So whenever name of your area contains any of the special character like dot or something, star or something, the name should be enclosed by your vertical bar. If I write the area as SQ is my area name, SQU is my area name, so then no need of that modular symbol or vertical bar. So whenever your name of your program is having any of the special character, then you should include vertical bar so that that special character will be considered for giving the name. Now code is a, this is actually, this is your code, it's not a data. So code assembler directive will tell you the it is only read only. It is a code. It is not containing any data. We cannot modify. And this is the name of your module. Now here if you take R0, why I am telling this is R0? So when you write the program, from where you get the data for this? When you call the function from the C, when you are calling the function from the C. So this square of I you are calling from the C. The content of I will be copied in R0 because you have more number of arguments. So first argument will be copied in R0, second argument will be copied in R1, R2, R3. So further if you have more arguments, that will be available in stack. So this I will be copied in R0. Now from R0, because data is when I make a function call, the data is available in R0 now. Here explicitly I did not move R0 equal to I something. Automatically when you make a function call from C, that content of parameter which is present in the function call will be copied in the registers. So first parameter will be copied in R0. So here R0, if I call square of 5, R0 will have 5. So 5 into 5 is multiplied and the result will be stored in R1. Now the result is available in R1. Then why again I'm moving back to R0 only here is whenever you're returning. So when function call happens, you execute the function call and then once again you come back to the main procedure. When you're returning, we'll be writing in your C code return I here. So return I star I. So the return value here return statement you are using, whereas in assembly automatically the data will be available when it is returning, the result should be available in R0. So your result should be available in R0, return value of your function call. So you perform any function, okay, if I add two numbers, the return value of your add function should be available in R0. If I perform square root, the square root should be available in R0. Whatever the work I do, if I do string concatenation, the final answer string address should be available in R0. So whenever you do some functionality, the function's result and return value should be available in R0. So if you move into R2 instead of R0, you will get a output as 5 only because R0 was having 5 only, no. So you will not have the result 5 into 5 is 25 in R0. So your R0 is a where your register where your C code will take the return of your particular function. So before before ending your function, the result wherever you calculate the result, you see to that the result will be available in R0. So copy the result back to R0. Then your link register, already we know about the link register and PC, LR and PC, PC and LR. This is 14 and this is 15. So PC will be like your LR will have a return address. That return address once again are copying back to the PC. So you're returning to the main program. So here mainly you are following ATPCS standard. What the ATPCS standard says is whenever you make a function call, where the parameters should be available. Your maximum 4 parameters are stored in R0, R1, R2, R3. More than 4 if I have argument 5, A5, A5 if I have A6, A5, I have some more arguments. So A5 will be available in top of a stack. Top of stack. Your stack, you already we know the stack instructions. Once again, we'll revise the stack instruction for further program. Top of a stack, 5th argument. Next position, argument 6. 5th is in top of stack, and the stack pointer will be incremented or decremented depending on whether it is in growing stack or decreasing stack. So next position A6 will be available. Like this, your parameters will be available. Now basically you should see to that number of arguments in the C program should be kept minimum, so that you will not have a complication of writing the code for processing your arguments which is present in the stack. So try to minimize the number of arguments in your function call. Up to 4 is fine. If you go more than 4, then it will be difficult for you to process because you have to write the stack related program like stack processing you should write. When you have more number of arguments, the stack processing you should write. That stack processing will make you people to write a complicated code so that your function's efficiency will come down. So better to minimize the number of arguments. But sometimes we can't avoid, you need more arguments. That time you can go with the more number of arguments, but maximum you try to avoid the number of arguments. And in your function calls, now you will be using some of the variables, local variables. So that local variables should be available in R4 and R4, R5, R6, R7, R8. Even you can use R9, R10 and all, but those registers are used by some purpose like stack limit and all. So what we have to do is when you are using more than, like if you are using some variables, local variables in your function call, then you can use register R1, R4, R5, R6, R7. Even you can use R9, R10 and all, but those registers should be preserved in the stack in the before the function call, and then later you have to pop it from the stack. But these registers are no need to preserve in the stack. And then these are all the your variable register. So that variable registers are used for creating some local variable in the function call. So this is very important. When you understand that how this where the arguments are stored, what is the purpose of this variable register, then you can write efficiently your function calls by using ARM, and then your actual main program will be available in C. You are writing function call in R. Now this is a simple code. You are written the program in the main program in the C, and the function you are written in the assembly. You are calling that function. So when you make a function call, your assembly code will be executed. Now these two are separate entity. This is assembly code, that is C code. How these two things are linked together and executed? For that you have the execution procedure. So in this execution procedure, what we can do is, so in your Keil also you can run this. You can run in the Keil, or you can run this in your Linux-based environment. How you people run your data structure lab, ADA lab and all, in the same environment also you can run. But instead of GCC compiler, you should have ARM-CC compiler. So ARM-CC compiler for compiling C code. ARM ASM assembler is for assembling your assembly code. And these two are assembled separately and compiled separately. Now these two should be linked. For linking purpose, you have a linker, ARM linker. Command name is ARM link. So ARM link. Now when I compile main1.c, it is going to generate main1.o object file. .c is compiled, .o is generated. .o is generated. Same way, .s is assembled, then .object file is generated. Now these two object files should be linked. So this is going to generate main.o, and this is generating square.o. Now these are two separate files. This should be linked. For linking this, you are using ARM linker. So this two is linked together, and then this is a reference file, cross-reference file, which is created. So you have to use that cross-reference file, and then these two are linked together, and it generates a single executable file or hex file. Hex file is generated, single hex file or executable file, or .a.out will be generated, so that you can use it for executing the program. So this is a simple steps. We can execute also this appropriate environment you have to set up and you have to execute. So this we have seen, you have written the program in C, and the function is also in C only. Now instead of having function in C, we are writing the square function in assembly. So you are calling that from the C. So why this R0 is choose? Always the first argument will be available in R0, and square means you are going to multiply the same R0 and R10, and you are going to store in R1, and the result should be available in R0. So we are returning to the main program. This is the procedure for executing the program. Now, when I see by this I'll stop today's session, and I will discuss the further second module in the next session. And